Cern Basher said that it was okay that the first two parts of this series on his life didn't turn him into a sniveling and shivering. Anyway, everybody's always worried about this stuff, Cern. Was it hard? Was it difficult? Was it
Not really, although I would say that I'm not that comfortable really talking about myself. It's not something I spend a lot of time doing. My job as an advisor is squarely focused on others,
yes, yes.
and that's more comfortable for me.
Okay, all right.
But it wasn't so bad.
Well, and like your dad, no matter what you decide to do in terms of writing a book, you now have at least these three pieces of work that you could keep in your archives, and your kids could say, well, there it is. I've got at least this part of it. CERN, you somewhere along the line, oh, well, okay, we can go all the way back. And by the way, people may want to go back and look at part one and part two because they were fascinating, talking about his years in mountaineering, in cycling, in running, in the school years, the young years with the kids, all the rest. You've had, would you agree that you've had a pretty darn interesting life?
Oh, it's been fantastic. I've traveled a ton. I've gone to so many different places in the world and done so many cool things. I've been very fortunate in that regard. Yeah.
All right. So we learned in part one that you were coming out of college, you were studying finance, and you had a teacher that, or professor, who kind of gave you the right push at exactly the right time to send you off into the world of stocks and bonds and options and all the rest. Can you fill in a little more of the details of that transition?
Yeah, well, Dr. Robert Brooks was his name, and he was instrumental, I think, in sort of opening my eyes to the possibilities. And as I mentioned that I took a graduate level finance course, and I really enjoyed learning everything I learned in that course. I still have the textbook to this day. And I would also say that too, I think that that was probably the genesis of my love of spreadsheets, believe it or not,
Okay.
Randy. And so here actually is the oldest spreadsheet that I have that I developed. There's my wife again.
That's it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. I built the Black-Scholes option valuation model in a spreadsheet so that I could learn it and understand it.
Huh.
And this is just a screenshot of one of the pages, but behind this is all the calculations necessary to calculate the value of a call option in
Wow.
red there, the $1.95, given all the different assumptions.
Wow. How about,
This spreadsheet is probably getting close to 30 years old.
and you still use it?
Maybe older, actually. No, I haven't used this in a long time.
Okay. All right.
No.
That's nice. That's great.
But it was the tool that sort of helped me understand how option pricing works from
Right.
a from a true fundamental level because I built the spreadsheet to calculate it.
Right.
So I have this kind of intuitive understanding of how that works, and that for me was important.
Yeah.
But yeah, to this day, 30 some years later, I still enjoy spreadsheets.
Nice. I like it. I like it a lot. I, by the way, also like spreadsheets. For me, it's a much narrower thing, though. Everybody uh, has the things that they maybe have just a special capability. I can look at a P&L like other people look at a piece of art.
Hmm.
Um, I can look at a P&L and it materializes. It becomes a living thing. I can like immediately go and see where the problems are, where the issues are, where things can improve. It's really been fun doing that over the years for clients because I did that this last third of my life. I was a marketing consultant, but it also got into the spreadsheet because I believe everything's marketing, including the P&L. Okay, so
Right, sure.
all
Yeah.
right. All right, so you start your love of spreadsheets. You're now in your 20s, I assume, mid 20s.
Yeah, and so I left college and moved back to Calgary, Canada.
Okay.
And having been gone there for 3 years, I really wasn't plugged into anybody there. And so what I decided to do was I went to the local regulator in Canada. Each province has its own securities regulation department. So here we have the SEC. In Canada, it's each province has their own one. So I went to what's called the Alberta Securities Commission. And I basically said, I said, I would like to volunteer. I would like to learn what you guys do. And they were so impressed and so taken aback. They said, we can't do that, but we can pay you. So I said, sure, if you have to, I'll take your money.
So you're a born salesman too.
But apparently, yeah. And so I spent time sort of learning the ins and outs of some of the securities regulation, and that was an interesting experience to work for the regulator. And they made the mistake of paying me by the hour. And so I worked a lot of hours, right? But they were very happy with me because I actually probably ended up helping them make a whole bunch of money.
Wow.
We caught a number of securities violations while I was there, and it was from the research that I'd done. So that was a pretty cool experience. I'm glad that I didn't make a career out of that. That would have been a bit mind-numbing for me, but it was a good place to start.
So and it also became a great thing for your resume.
It was good. Yeah. From there, I made the jump to Exxon's Canadian division. It's called Imperial Oil.
Because of course,
what
else would you do in Calgary?
Exactly. Yeah. The head of the group was a runner, and so he liked to recruit runners. And by the way, we went to the U.S. Corporate Track and Field Championships one year, and I am part of a corporate world record holding team.
There you go.
So there were some benefits. Yeah. But I worked in the natural gas marketing group for a while. And again, my love of spreadsheets served me well because we built spreadsheet models for all of the different wellheads and factoring in the pipeline costs to ship gas to different markets. And so that was a lot of fun. I really sort of honed my spreadsheet skills doing that. We had some really complicated spreadsheets in those days because natural gas is priced at all kinds of different points all around North America.
Yeah.
And you've got to factor in the cost of shipping the gas to different places and all that. So we were trying to optimize all of that. And I was part of the group that was doing that. But I knew in my heart that I really wasn't that interested in oil and gas. And by the way, if you're not an engineer, it really limits your upward mobility in that business. And so that was just a stepping stone for me. And then I had the opportunity to move to the United States and move to Cincinnati. And then I make a long story short, I ended up working for a bank there. And the amazing opportunity came about in 1995 when I started working there. Some other people on the team had left. And so I stepped into their shoes and started managing a bunch of mutual funds.
Oh, okay.
And that was in that period when the internet went crazy. And I was managing a large cap growth fund. And so I have an outstanding 5-year track record as a mutual fund manager.
Did you quit in 1999?
I left at the peak in 2000.
Come on. Is that right?
Yeah. So that was good. And then from there, I left to start my own investment management firm, wealth management firm.
Oh, okay.
Which is what I've been doing since. So that was.
How does one make that transition? I mean, how do you, since you were working in a bank, you might have had some some customers of the bank, or did you partner up, or how did you make that transition?
Yeah, so back in those days, the bank, like a lot of banks, custody their own client assets, and we had our own custody group. That wasn't the most efficient, and the tech that they had wasn't that great. So the bank started a little process to see if there are other alternatives, and I was on that team, and there was another guy from the private bank on the team, and he and I basically determined that Charles Schwab was in that business, and Charles Schwab actually would be likely a good partner for us. We presented our ideas to bank management. They promptly threw our report away and said, "No, we're going to keep our custody group. Thank you very much, for your time." And we said, "Well, thank you very much. We now know what we can do." And so we left the bank, started our own firm, and custody with Charles Schwab.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it was a little education for us as well that paid off.
Right. So is this something where you needed Charles Schwab to say yes, or is this something which is just like you can automatically do it?
Yeah. Charles Schwab's in the business of providing services to independent advisors, and there were other firms at the time as well that did that. So yeah, we weren't particularly worried about, whether Schwab would accept us or not.
Mhm.
That was basically the business that they were in that at that time, in addition to being in the retail business, which they still are today.
Right, right, right. So
Yeah.
okay, you're a fledgling wealth management company. Now you need clients. So was one of you a salesman?
The guy from the private bank was the sales guy,
Okay,
and I was focused on doing the research and managing the portfolios.
I got it. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So he was,
But, we experienced the downside of the dot-com bust,
yeah.
right? And so for the first, 2, 3 years of that business, it was a pretty brutal market. The market dropped 50% at one point.
Yeah.
So tough time to be starting a business. It really forced us to figure out how we were going to add value to our clients.
Mhm.
Um, and we kind of morphed from being an investment management shop to being more of a wealth management shop, looking at client situation more holistically, which is appropriate anyway. And so that was a good thing. That was necessary in order for us to survive.
So if I understand you right, then as opposed to trying to convince somebody that you could do a great job of managing their money this week or this month or this year, you wanted to convince them that for their lifetime, they should hang out with you because you would put together something that made sense for a lifetime.
Yeah, I think that's the gist of it, Randy. I think it's looking at things just, what are the tax impacts? What what are the client's goals and where are they trying to get to? And then so how do we build a portfolio to get there? It's not like, oh, we have one portfolio and everybody should be in this.
Right.
It's more
Oh,
customizing
yeah.
the approach for our clients' needs.
So was that a common way for investment managers to work back then? Because we have a lot of companies that do that now, but I was wondering, was that kind of a new idea back when you were doing it?
And those 25 years ago, that was a fairly new idea. There were certainly many firms that were doing it. And so it wasn't a brand new idea, but the industry really hadn't moved that way in any serious amount yet.
Mhm.
And so I think there were a lot of people like us that were leaving brokerage firms, leaving banks
Mhm.
to start independent investment advisory businesers.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. And so what would you say you learned in that 3 years? I mean, what were, and again, he was the salesman, you were the research guy, but then who was the business brains? Who was the one that was kind of deciding the direction for the business or which clients to go after, where to find them, et cetera? Who was doing that part?
Yeah, I think we both shared that responsibility. Um, I think we both, I mean, certainly from the financial aspect, I was, mapping out our business and doing the projections and that and so on. So, we had discussions about that together in terms of where we wanted to take our business.
Mhm.
Um, but certainly from a attracting client aspect, my business partner at the time was solely focused on that.
Mhm.
Um, but then, the market turned,
Mhm.
and when the
As it
bottom,
will, as it will.
as it always will, always does, always has. Yeah. And then we enjoyed a number of great years until we hit the financial crisis. And for me, that was probably the scariest time I've had in this business.
Interesting.
And let me just share it with you, just take you back. You may remember this. Um, I saved a number of the Wall Street Journal cover pages, and these are digital versions
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
Here we are, September 8th, 2008. You wake up in the morning and to a headline that says U.S. seizes mortgage giants. Government oust CEOs of Fannie Mae, Freddie promises up to 200 billion in capital. Right, and and there were some cracks in the system before this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right, this wasn't the first thing, but this is where we really started to roll.
Right. Right.
Okay, that was September 8th, and then the next here's September 15th. Crisis on Wall Street as Lehman totters. Merrill Lynch is sold. AIG seeks to raise cash. Okay.
Yep.
And
Remember
then
him
here we are on the 16th. AIG Lehman shock hits world markets. AIG faces cash crisis as stock dives 61%.
Yeah.
Right. US to take over AIG, an $85 billion bailout. Central bank injects cash as credit dries up. Like the whole system was seizing. This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
September
Yeah.
17th.
Oh, yeah.
September 24th, Warren Buffett to invest 5 billion in Goldman Sachs to keep them afloat.
Yeah.
Okay. Washington Mutual was seized. This is September 26th, sold to JP Morgan. Largest failure in US banking history. Okay. Washington Mutual stock down
Yep.
95%.
Yep. Yep.
And then, it continues October 11th, wild day, caps worst week ever for stocks. Like this crisis went on and on and on and on. And for a good 6 months, we weren't sure if the financial system was going to survive.
Absolutely. 100%.
Right. And so this was different for me than the internet bubble, which was really focused on sort of one sector of the economy. This was more foundational.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly, it was the financials, but it affected everything. And so this was a scary time, and this was another period where the stock market essentially dropped 50% for a period of time,
Yeah. Actually, a little more, right? A little more.
maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then the U.S. to buy stakes in the nation's largest banks, and then you can see here big days. The Dow was up, 11% on October 13th, right? And then here's October 16th. Economic fears reignite market slump. So we had good days, we had bad days, much like we often see in Tesla stock today,
Sure, sure.
right? Some of the best days follow some of the worst days. It
Of
was the
course.
same thing back then for the entire stock market.
Yep, yep.
Okay, so anyway, and then this is kind of funny. Greenspan admits errors to hostile House panel. Yeah, you think?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like not not following George Bush's the president's 7 efforts uh, before Congress to try to get them to stop doing the derivative nonsense. Okay, so that was a very interesting time for you. So this partner was still with you at that time?
Yeah, I ended up leaving that firm in essentially 2015
Oh,
to start the firm that I'm at now.
uh-huh.
The firm that I initially started got pretty big. We had a lot of employees, and I found that I was spending really all my time in internal meetings
Mm,
and less focused on doing research,
mhm,
and certainly not much time with clients. And I really enjoy doing the research, and I enjoy working with clients directly.
mhm, mhm.
And so I saw an opportunity to use some of the new technologies that had come out in that time period and build a firm that was very small but yet very capable. And so I left the firm that I co-founded with one other person to start another firm.
Okay.
And that's where we are today. And started that firm about 9 years ago. And it's just the two of us, and we have a very lean operation. And I get to spend all my time doing the research and the investment management and working directly with clients. And those are the two things that I love.
Right, 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 right. Well, let's go back though to 2008 because I mean that's a super interesting thing, as you point out, probably the hardest business time that you ever had to spend. And I had already sold my business just before that. Unfortunately, when the crisis was already obvious to the business world in 2007, so I got about, oh, I don't know, 20% of the value that I should have gotten for the company, which kind of messed up my entire financial life. But anyway, that's my story, not yours. So you're sitting there in 2008, or 2000, late 2007, all the way into 2008. Clients are on the phone, probably screaming and yelling and going crazy because housing prices were also falling 50% and more, 60, 70% in some cases because they were way overinflated. So what was that like in terms of deal? You love working with clients, so what was it like working with clients in those scary days?
Well, very challenging. Um, as you can imagine, in a time of crisis, you're not only dealing with the crisis and dealing with the fact that portfolios have lost, maybe half of their value in some cases, if it's an all equity portfolio. But you're also dealing with then kind of the psychological and the emotional aspects of all this. And even when this crisis was over, no one rang a bell in March of 2009 saying the market had bottomed. I sort of felt like for years and years afterwards, people still had the mindset that that could come back at any time. And so that crisis was with us for a long time to come, even though it bottomed in March of 2009. Um, I would say all the way through, 2013, 2014, I think people were still pretty worried about something happening.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was a lot of talk that for the next 5 or 10 years that some people that have been burned during that time might never come back into the market.
Yeah.
I suspect most have, but I could certainly understand where people would have been like, I mean, yeah. Anyway, so you're doing a lot of hand holding, getting these people, probably a lot of people quitting or going on to other firms, or did you have much loss?
We didn't have a whole lot of loss with clients. We had some, obviously you always have some. But I think we were always very careful with clients to make sure they understood, what they were in for and how the portfolio was going to behave.
Mhm.
Um, the challenge you have sometimes is when people maybe are doing other things on the side that may be amplifying their situation,
Sure.
and in a time of crisis, that's not so helpful.
Right.
Like I remember, for example, going back to the internet boom, we had a portfolio of growth stocks for one client, and we were thinking that that was just a small part of his portfolio. Well, unbeknownst to us, he invested everything else in the same stuff that we were buying for him.
See, no.
Right. And so when those stocks experienced some volatility, then his whole portfolio dropped a lot. So those situations, I think, were tough. And that also made it very clear that we needed to be more of a wealth manager and make sure we saw the whole picture rather than just a part of the picture for some clients.
Sure, 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 sure.
Right. So that we were aware of the total risk that our clients were facing. Um, but yeah, there were so many lessons in that crisis, and it was just such a great experience. But it's a reminder that things can go sideways pretty quickly and in a pretty major way. And so you always kind of have to keep one eye open for, big issues like that. Hopefully we don't see that again in our lifetimes, but
Yeah,
the
so
nature
the
of humanity is that we're going to have some challenges.
yeah, so like Bush, I saw the derivative thing coming. Not because I was that smart. I heard an article one day on the radio about the derivatives, explaining how they worked,
Yeah.
where they were, and how they were basically unmanageable and impossible to place value on them. And I wasn't necessarily any financial genius. I knew how to run businesses and whatnot. But I'm listening to that whole story. I went, this is really a bad idea. I mean, it's just like it was like immediate. I'm like, this is not smart.
Yeah.
And so I think other smart people probably saw it coming, but they were making so much money that they were unwilling to get away from the feeding trough in order to ring the bell. That probably the only other time that kind of alarm bell's been going off in my head has been basically for 5 years with regard to the deficit and with regard to the amount of debt that there is both consumer, real estate, corporate and federal, but especially federal. I'm just thrilled that we have a president that seems to have stepped up, unlike who's able to not only step up and attack it, but that the Congress seems to be going along with him. So maybe we're going to be able to avert the kind of crisis that we had in 2008.
Well, I really hope so. I mean, I think that politicians on both sides for years and years and years have talked about government overspending, right? And there's video footage of, of Obama appointing Biden to basically do a Doge type thing, right? And so if we're really truly going through this process now, and I hope we are, and I hope that they continue to make progress,
Mhm.
it's needed because if the U.S. government finds itself in some kind of a debt crisis, then it's going to be really bad. The thing that I worry about is this deflation that we're going to see from AI and from robotics,
Mhm.
this technology-induced deflation, which on the surface of it is really good for everybody because it'll make the cost of everything cheaper. But for debt holders, it's terrible because now you're forced to pay back the debt with deflated dollars.
Right.
And so what I worry about is that then the only way out of it for the government is to just print money
Money. Mhm.
and debase the currency. So maybe it's not so much a debt problem, although if you own the debt,
Yeah.
you're going to receive your money back, but it's going to be with money that's not worth a whole lot. We're just in, I think, for some interesting times because we're going to have some cross currents of some of these big things hitting at the same time.
Yep, I think you're right. All right, let's wrap it up with the most obvious thing that we would want to wrap it up with, and that was the day that you found a Tesla in your life, or that you found that you wanted a Tesla, or that you became aware of Tesla. How did your story unfold?
Yeah. I wish the story could be better than it is. I had a client when Tesla went public. He was a guy who lived in the US, but he worked for a German company. He was an engineer, really smart guy. Um, and he liked to build his own electric vehicles.
Hmm.
And he heard about Tesla, I heard about Elon Musk, and he wanted to invest in the IPO, which we did. And early on for Tesla, it was rough,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And I didn't really pay that much attention to the company. I thought this client was kind of crazy to invest in Tesla. He said he was crazy to invest in Tesla. He expected to lose all his money, right? But he liked the idea of electric vehicles so much. He's like, I don't care. I want to support this company. And so then for years, I kind of didn't really focus on Tesla a whole lot. I mean, I was aware the client had it, and we monitored it and so on, but I wasn't studying the company in any serious way. And so it wasn't really until things really started to get going for Tesla did I come back to it and revisited it. But I had the opportunity to follow a company, right from the beginning, and I didn't.
right,
Now, I don't fault myself too much because everybody expected Tesla to fail,
right, including
and
Elon.
they should have failed, right? But that said, after the dot-com bust and after Amazon went down as much as it did, I think it was down like 97% at one point.
Right.
I always sort of promised myself that if I ever found another company that I thought had such long-term potential,
Hmm.
like an Amazon did,
Hmm.
that I would stick with it. I would follow the company. I would understand it deeply, and I would have the courage of my conviction to act.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so when I finally really dug into Tesla again, that's exactly what I found in looking at the company. And so it's become, a pretty major focus for me. It's not the only company I follow
Sure.
closely, but it's certainly one with the most interesting community of people. I can't name any other company with perhaps maybe strategy, MicroStrategy, starting to become a close second with a community of people that are so passionate about the
Right,
company
right,
that they'll almost fight to the death to defend it,
right.
right? And that's pretty unique. It doesn't happen very often.
No,
It happened a little bit with Apple. I think
sure.
some people were excited about their products,
Hmm.
but with Tesla, it's about all aspects of this company,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? There are people that are experts on the energy side, people experts on the auto side, AI, all the different aspects. And it's such an amazing community to be a part of because I feel like we're this one big global research team all working together to understand this company more deeply.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I've never had more fun than this. This has been an incredible experience, right?
yeah.
And hopefully, we all make a lot of money doing this, but it's just been fun, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I claim that this two and a half years that I've been doing this channel, and the year or so that it took us to write the book, actually two books, 3 years. I guess it's been 3 years on those two books. Has been the best job I've ever had. And I've had some pretty fun jobs over the years, and when I call them jobs, companies that I've owned. This one is by far the most fun and interesting. So when did you finally get really super interested and start doing your deep dive?
That's a good question. It kind of evolved over time and ended up taking more and more of my time. The thing that really took off for me was when I made a post about Robotaxi, and James Dalma reposted it, made some comments, and Elon responded to James. And Elon said something like, "You understand, but few do." And I took that as an indirect compliment to me.
Yeah, no kidding.
right? Because I wrote the post that James
Yes,
was
yes.
commenting on. And that's when something clicked for me, and I said, "Okay, I'm onto something here. If Elon is saying that, hey, these guys get it,
Yes, yes.
maybe I should continue to look at this." And then I did some work on the humanoid robot side,
Yeah, yeah.
and that post got a similar kind of response. I don't think Elon responded to it, but it's just gotten more interesting since then. Yeah.
All right. And of course, since you're on my show at least once and sometimes twice a week, I know, and my most of the folks who are watching right now kind of know your sense or your feelings about, the different aspects, the energy, all the different places and all the work that you've done, all the deep dives that you've taken. In fact, I think our next deep dive is going to be which may have been already it's probably this is probably after that. But we wanted to really go into this robotaxi rollout and what that's going to look like, because I think, well, it's probably going to be the most important week or so in Tesla's entire history.
Yeah, and I think it'll be quite indicative, actually, of what's to come. Because if you think about it, if they can conquer Austin, so to speak,
Right.
then it's copy paste in every city in America
Yeah. And beyond.
and beyond, right? And so what happens in Austin will certainly be very indicative of what could happen everywhere else. Now, my expectations for Austin are that things may happen a little slower there at first,
Mhm, mhm.
right? The next city should be an easier expansion than the first one, right? And then the next two more cities will be easier than the first two. It's going to keep getting easier and easier as they move on.
So the interesting thing is about Austin, though, is that Austin has a built-in customer base
Yeah,
of all the employees, families, the
yeah,
suppliers to the company, people that are, you know, fanboys because he's there, because it's become kind of, the biggest story in town. So it would seem like getting that first, 20,000 people to ride the vehicles is going to be a slam dunk, where they won't necessarily have that opportunity. Well, if they do Fremont or something like that, they would have that same
hmm
opportunity. But if they try to go to, I don't know, Arlington or to Georgia, Atlanta or something like that, they wouldn't have that same base.
yeah. I think by then there's going to be such a buzz about it
Yeah, probably.
that that's not really going to be so much of an issue. Um, I always come back to this. The economics of it are so compelling.
Yes.
And and when you talk to people about Uber, are they raving fans about Uber? Not really.
Right.
Like we use it, maybe it's better than a taxi service or whatever. It's car's a little cleaner, but there's plenty of issues with Uber. And a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm freaked out by the drivers. I want to be in a driverless car."
Right. Yes.
Right? A lot of women say that.
Right.
Right? They feel safer not having a
100%.
driver.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so I think it may surprise us how quickly people adopt this. I think people are ready. We're used to technology. We're used to having an app on our phone.
Hmm.
I think that the uptake actually could be surprisingly strong. Now, the thing I worry about is just like little hiccups here and there in the system, with FSD. I think FSD is highly capable. The version that they're going to roll out for this, I'm sure, will be incredible. But you can bet if there's any incident, any accident, any death, the media is going to blow it out of proportion.
Yeah. 100%.
Right. So that always has the risk of kind of throwing things off track for a little bit.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but that said, the economics are so compelling for this that's in the end, that's what will drive it.
Yeah. So, CERN, that brings us up to date on your life, which only leaves one obvious concluding question, and that would be, what's next? I mean, you got kids that are going to graduate from high school, go to college, all that, the normal kind of stuff that happens in the human life. But you've climbed Mount Fuji. You've built two beautiful companies. You've got an incredible family. Is there something left that someday you want to pursue that is kind of niggling in your brain right now?
I would say right now I'm doing all the things that I absolutely love. And I feel like after being in this business now for 30 years, just kind of getting the hang of it. right? I'm still learning.
It's very complex.
It's very complex. I hope, like Warren Buffett, I hope that I have another, you know, 30, 40, 50 years in this business. That would be cool,
Right.
right? Um, I just want to continue to do what I love, and this is it.
Mhm, mhm.
In terms of other things, I love to travel and do different things and the family and so on. I love spending time with my two younger kids. I was really enjoying them because I know with the first two kids how quickly that whole period went. And so I'm finding myself now really trying to soak up the time that I have with them.
Mhm, mhm.
We're all planning on going to Austin sometime in June to check out the robotaxis. So that'll be a fun family trip. My kids are completely indoctrinated into Tesla. My son was wearing a Cybertruck shirt this morning and so on. So that's been a lot of fun. The whole family's kind of become involved in this now.
Of course, that's great. I love it. All right, that's all the questions I've got. It would be unfair though not to let you have the last word. Is there something that I missed? Something that was so compelling about your life story that I should have known or couldn't have known, or that you'd like to leave us with?
There was a time in Barcelona. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think you covered it all, Randy.
Well, good. I'm glad I'm glad that we found a way to do it. And I appreciate the fact that as it wouldn't have been a Cern Basher video if we hadn't had some actual spreadsheets and some pictures. So Cern, as always, it's great to have you on, and thank you for doing this. And I hope everybody enjoyed it. And I guess at this point, I'm just going to say it's been great talking to you.
And back to regular programming next time.